Hi guys, it's Mrs. Millison. Let's do the check your understanding on page 563, which is a complete significance test for proportions. Okay, one proportion z-test. According to the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, job stress poses a major threat to the health of workers. A news report claims that 75% of restaurant employees feel that work stress has a negative impact on their personal lives. So that's 75%. That's our population parameter that we're going to check against. Okay, so that's my P. Managers of a large restaurant chain wonder whether this claim is valid for their employees. So they take a random sample of 100 employees and find that 68 answered yes when asked, does work stress have a negative impact on your personal life? So our P hat, or our sample proportion, is 68 out of 100, which of course is 0.68. Is this good reason to think that the proportion of all employees in this chain who would say yes differs from the 75%? Okay, so that differs is going to help us write our alternative hypothesis. So we're going to support our answer with a significance test. Okay, I'm going to move the book and go through the significance test. Okay, so far we know that the population parameter that we're checking against is 75%, and our sample statistic is 68%. So the null hypothesis has to say that P is equal to 0.75 because that's the status quo, that's the claim, okay? Now our alternative hypothesis has to follow that. So we could say less than 0.75, but the question said, does it give us evidence that their answers differ from 0.75? So we're going to do a not equal to. So this is going to be a two-tailed test. Okay, I'm just going to write that here. And we'll talk about that when we do the do section. Okay, of course we have to identify what P is. P is the true population proportion of restaurant employees at this large chain that feel that work stress has a negative impact on their personal lives. So that's what we're looking for. Of course we are going to evaluate this at an alpha of 0.05. I don't think it said that in the check your understanding, but when it doesn't say, use an alpha of 5%. Okay? Our state's done. We've got our hypotheses, we've identified our population parameter, and we've stated our alpha. That's just a little something I wrote. Okay. For the plan section, we got to write the inference method. So this is a one proportion z-test. Okay? And in the next check your understanding, we're going to compare it to a one proportion z-interval, but we'll do that later. So of course in the plan, we have to go through our conditions. So we know our conditions: random, independent, and normal. So random, yes, it was stated that a random sample of employees was taken, so that's condition satisfied. For independence, we do know that all employees are independent of each other, so let's check our 10% rule. So it's still population is greater than 10 times the sample size. The sample size was 100, so I'm pretty confident that this large restaurant chain has more than 1,000 employees. It did say it was large, so I think we're pretty confident to assume that. Okay. Now our normal condition, we can still do our large counts because now we have a P as opposed to not having a P when we do a confidence interval. So we can go back to our sample size and our P, which again is this P, 0.75, not the sample proportion. Okay. So obviously 75 is greater than 10, and then 1 minus P, 25 is greater than 10. So normal. Our large counts condition is satisfied. We can throw this on a normal curve, which is what we're about to do. Okay, conditions are good. All right, so let's do the do. Now the do in a significance test is basically a z-score and a probability with the z-score. So our z-score is our statistic minus the P of our HO. So I'm going to put a little sub-zero there to match the sub-zero for the HO. Okay. So there's our data minus our mean over our standard deviation. So we have to do back to the standard deviation of the sampling distribution. Okay, so we'll throw in our numbers. Let's see, 0.68. And we get a z-score of negative 1.62. Now if we think about this on a normal curve, here's my 0.75, here's my 0.68, so my z is negative 1.62, but if you recall, we did a two-tailed test. We want not equal to 0.75, so we want the less than, which is over here, which we already calculated, but we also want the greater than. So whatever that value is, it doesn't matter. The z over here is positive 1.62. So I've got to find both those areas. And of course they're the same, so if I find one, I'll just double it. So we'll throw this one in the calculator. Oops. I think I did the other one already. So negative a gazillion to negative 1.62. So that's going to get us an area on this side of 0.0526. So that's the probability of less than over here. So of course that probability is going to be the same thing. And two-tailed test, that's why I got to do two of them. Add these together, so we'll get our p-value of 0.1052. Okay, so there's about 10%, about 10.5% chance that it's going to differ from 75%. Okay, so we are going to compare that. We were told to, or we weren't told, we assumed to use an alpha of 5. So we're going to compare our p-value to our alpha value. Whoops, sorry, our p-value to our alpha value. So our p is 0.1052, our alpha is 0.05. Now, since that's not true, p is not less than alpha, okay? Since the p-value is not less than alpha, we can't reject the hoe. We have to fail to reject the hoe. So since the p is less than alpha, we're going to fail to reject the hoe. So this is what we think, okay? We're going to fail to reject it, so we're actually going to think that this is true. So therefore, we do not have evidence that the true population proportion of restaurant employees at this large chain that feel that work stress has a negative impact on their lives is different than 0.75. So we think our employees feel like every other restaurant employee, okay? We don't think it's any different. So I wrote that out, okay? So again, the p-value, 0.1052, is not less than the alpha of 0.05, so we fail to reject the hoe. So therefore, we do not have convincing evidence that the true population proportion of employees at this large restaurant chain that feel work stress has a negative impact on their personal lives is different from 0.75, okay? So again, that's just describing the ha, which we don't have evidence for. Okay, so that is your complete significance test. And in the next Check Your Understanding, we're going to compare this to a confidence interval for the same values. Okay, see you next time.